All right. So this week we're going to be diving into some of the origins of our most used and heard sayings that we have. Some of them surprisingly have some dark origins, which we'll dive into here a little bit sooner. I know that I've already reached out to Isaiah and Josh early this week and asked what some of their most favorite common ones were that we could dive into, which we hit a few here. Um, but yeah, we're going to go ahead and start into that. Do you guys have anything before we begin?
I think that the only one of these that I have actually known is how Ring Around the Rosie was fucking really
Yeah.
dark. So I'm very excited to hear about some of the actual phrases because I don't, I'm not going around singing "Ring Around the Rosie," but I am going around saying that shit gave me goosebumps and shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of dark things behind a lot of these. We won't go into too many of those ones necessarily, or at least in this one in depth, but we will cover a lot of the popular ones. But yeah, there's a lot of darkness in the history of the world. Let's just put it that way. So let's go to begin here. I have a few right off the bat that Josh, you have reached out personally and said that you're curious on. And the first one being goosebumps. Uh, Out of curiosity, do you have any idea what the origins of this one might be?
I have no idea. If I had to make up a guess, I would either say that maybe like a goose, if it's killed and its feathers are removed, that it would have a bumpy skin. That's literally the only thing that could come to mind because I have no other idea why that would be named that.
That's fair. Josh, Isaiah.
I've got no clue. I've got
Oh,
no
yeah.
clue on where that come from.
I
Wait,
get
I
that.
think
We know what goosebumps are, though, right?
yeah, because I have also heard it called goose skin. So maybe the goose has
I've
bumpy
never heard
skin.
that.
Yeah, I've heard
Okay,
people call it goose
we're
skin.
pretty close. So the phrase goosebumps derives from the phenomenon associated with the goose skin. Pretty much is what Isaiah said. Goose feathers grow from the pores on the goose's epidermis, and they resemble human hair follicles. And when those feathers are plucked, its skin's protrusions are like essentially when humans get bumps from being scared.
Nope.
There you go.
Nope.
What do you
Could you
mean, no?
imagine? Look at your arm
It's
and then
fine.
imagine a feather just growing out of that. No, fuck that.
It's
Do
your
you think-
I don't
it's your
fuck with
pore.
geese.
Instead of a blackhead, you got a feather.
A feather. Mm-mm.
Do you think of the first time someone discovered that, like they were taking the feather off of a goose and they felt its skin and they were like, "Whoa!" And then they got goosebumps and they're like,
I'm part
"Goosebumps."
goose.
Well, I
That's how
get
it
the
was. That's when
feather.
it was coined, right there, right then and there.
Exactly, trademark. Uh, I don't know. There's a lot of these that we'll go through the list that I've honestly I don't even know how this would have became public knowledge across the world, but we'll see. The second one, which I think is probably one of the more popular ones that we've heard, kill two birds with one stone. Of course, sort of the saying for being able to knock out two things or knock out two objectives doing one thing. Um, the present form of this comes back as far as 1656. And it's believed to originate in the story of, and just as the previous years, we're going to continue to probably butcher a lot of these names because I don't know pronunciations.
Hell yeah.
So this originates from the story of Delaeus and Icarus from Greek mythology. Deiphobus killed two birds with one stone in order to get the feathers of the birds and make wings. The father and son who escaped from the labyrinth on Crete by those made wings were flying out. So essentially, this Greek god made those wings, killed two birds, allowed them to fly out from this labyrinth using it. Um, and it's supposedly even heard back farther in 1546 and taken from another saying called saying, I will learn to stop two gapes with one bush. So sort of along the same lines of you're going to accomplish two things by doing the same one thing.
Yeah, I think the two birds one is a little bit easier to understand.
Yeah.
I gotta stop them gapes.
Got to stop the gapes with the bush. Moving on, we have beating a dead horse, which also I think this one might be probably one of the more ones that we hear every single day. So this is originally deriving from the UK phrase flogging a dead horse. It's most commonly probably, well, I should say there's a couple different theories behind this one. The first one is in the racehorsing scene. In racehorsing, of course, has been gone back centuries. And this can go back from when jockeys would use the riding crop to beat the horse in order to run faster. And essentially, when the horse would get too exhausted, it would just be considered dead. So you were beating that dead horse with the crop,
Oh
essentially.
wow. Okay.
Um, and then later on in the mid 19th century, an English politician named John Bright used the saying, and it was the first recorded mention of the saying in 1859, when he was essentially saying that the campaign he was running was beating a dead horse because they were just losing.
Interesting. So I've
Mm.
always envisioned it as like the South Park clip, right, where like the guy's actually beating a dead horse on the ground with a bat. But in reality, the horse was still alive. It was just dead in terms of the
Right,
race.
as in
Yeah.
terms of it cannot run any faster or longer.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know.
What do you gain from beating the dead horse in your
Like
scenario?
an actual dead horse, nothing. But
Yeah.
you know, South Park does its
Well,
thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point, right? Beating the dead horse, like there is no purpose. That's why they tell you not to beat a dead
I mean,
horse.
that's fair. That's fair. The next one, which I actually questioned you, Josh, on the first time that you mentioned
Oh
it.
boy.
There's more than a one way to skin a cat. This is the first time I've ever heard this saying.
Really? I've heard this one a
Absolutely.
few times. Yeah.
Yes, please, Isaiah, defend me.
I got your back, bro. No, I've heard that. There's more than one way to skin a cat. It's like means like there's more than one way to do something. So if Josh is like, I'm gonna take this to do this and do that, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this and then that, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, I was familiar with the phrase, but I've become much more familiar with it because of the backlash from like animal rights
Skinning
activist groups and
cats?
stuff who
Yeah,
are
I
like,
bet.
"Don't say one way to skin a cat; it promotes cat violence." Say this instead.
That's
So that's how I
hilarious.
became more familiar with it. I mean, it's already on its own a pretty gruesome saying. So I was wondering why it became a popularized thing.
Yeah. So the oldest known use of this phrase was in the work Way Down East by Seba Smith, which was in 1854. Um, I was able to do some research, and it seemed that it's originally gotten its roots in a 17th century proverb, which was a little bit different. That proverb was, "There are more ways to kill a dog than hanging."
Oh my
So
god,
along the
even more
same line,
brutal.
but what is actually sort of funny with it, or fun, quote unquote, with the saying, is that it sort of seems like it became an author joke along the lines that essentially authors would try to use it in some sort of fashion in their works going forward. I saw some authors would use, there are more ways to kill a cat than choking it with cream, which that was found in the 1830s. Mark Twain even got on it, or in the 1889, in a Connecticut Yankee and King Author's Court, which she wrote, she was wise, subtle, and knew more than one way to skin a cat. And there was even some sayings that said, uh, choking a cat with butter, or killing a dog with pudding, that went farther back.
So it was like author's version of the Super Troopers joke where they try to say
Essentially,
meow at the pullover.
essentially, essentially, just became a running joke for authors, and just seeing how absurd you can make that phrase. It seems.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Moving on, and this one's, I guess, getting into a little bit darker side of things here. We can move on to pulling one's leg. Um, so from what I've seen, a lot of what I've come across has been two theories, but there's not really any evidence to support either. So I don't really know the origin of this. So the first one is that thieves used to pull legs to trip people back in the medieval and Victorian days, to where they would literally pull one's leg, and then their group of thieves would jump the person that they pulled, rob them, or essentially do whatever they need to, and then leave them. So that's where one leg pulling one's leg first originated. But then I also saw it around the 18th century. So in 1783, a lot of the executions in England were done by hanging. And there's specific suspension bridge that was used. And I guess there's two ways to hang people or prisoners. One is a short hanging method, and one's a long hanging method. the long hanging method allows the neck to break during the process, or the short hanging method doesn't. But during the short hanging method, where essentially the prisoners are choking and essentially waiting there in agony, people would jump on their legs and pull down to help them choke faster to death,
Oh
essentially.
my god.
So people would ask to help pull one's leg to help essentially alleviate what they're feeling during that time.
Neither of those sounds like someone pulling a joke on you.
Yeah, dude,
Absolutely
you're
not.
pulling my leg. No, dude, you're fucking
None.
murdering me.
Which is why there's a lot of dispute and if any of those is the true meaning behind how that phrase came about. Because of course none of those mean the sort of joking saying that you would get from that. Moving on, paying through the nose. I've never heard this one either. Have either of you guys have heard this
Yeah,
one?
I've heard them
Damn,
paying
what
through
the
the
hell?
nose.
Damn. All right. So paying through the nose is an idiom which means to pay more than something is worth or to pay an exorbitant price for. The origin of this phrase, pays through the nose, is quite murky, though it seems to be associated in some way to paying of taxes. When the Danes conquered Ireland in the 19th century, they took a census by counting noses. And essentially, each nose was essentially someone in the household that had to pay taxes. Um, and there's a myth that anyone who did not pay their nose tax had their nose split in punishment. Though there's little to support this, there's actually a little bit of old historical physical data to support this, which I don't sort of understand that. They say there's no physical data, but also a little bit. Um, but that's sort of where the saying came from, of course, being taxes.
I don't even understand. Like, splitting somebody's nose sounds fucking gruesome. Like, that is.
Also, just punching someone straight in the nose.
Yeah, that is fucked up. Well, yeah, if it's punching
Yeah.
somebody in the nose, then that's like, okay, it's not as gruesome. But if they literally split your nose in half, bro, like cut that shit,
Yeah.
just no,
Straight down.
not interested.
So this last one here, this is probably the most interesting one for me, is running amok. So of course, running amok is described as acting or behaving disruptly or uncontrollably. Um, have either of you heard of this? This is actually one that I've heard, even though I haven't heard the last three or so. This is one I have heard.
I've heard this one as well.
Yeah, I've definitely heard it. No clue what amok means, but I've heard the phrase for sure.
Yeah, so amok essentially describes acting or behaving disruptively or uncontrollably. The word actually derives from a Southeast Asian language, a traditional meaning an episode of sudden mass assault against people or objects, and it's usually by a single individual, following by a period of brooding, which traditionally been regarding occurring especially in the Malaysian culture that this happens. The syndrome amok is even actually found in the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-TR. So it is a classified disorder by medical professionals. According to Malaysian and Indonesian cultures, amok was a rooted, deep spiritual belief. They believe that amok was caused by, and again, another name I'm going to completely butcher, and I'm sorry, Hirutu Bilin, which was an evil tiger spirit that entered one's body and caused horrendous acts. As a result of this belief, those in Malaysian culture tolerated amok and dealt with the after effects with no ill will towards those assailants. Uh, this is also considered a cultural bound syndrome for Malaysia, Indonesia, essentially, people would just go crazy, have massacres, sudden violent outfits against others in their villages, completely out of whim. And essentially, that's what these would be described as amok happenings.
That sounds like Nova,
Damn.
bro.
And
That's
an,
Nova.
an early Western description of the practice appears in the journals of British explorer Captain James Cook, who counted amok firsthand in 1770 during a voyage around the world. Cook writes in his diaries of an individual behaving in a reckless, violent manner without cause and indiscriminately killing and maiming villagers and animals in a frenzied attack that he witnessed. It is also widely accepted, or also seen essentially, that it doesn't seem to necessarily affect women and children. It seems to be specifically a male syndrome, or sort of event. Running amok would thus be a way of escaping the world, um, or sort of like a very barbaric way of escaping one's problems. It seems from people who have it, they seem to sort of go into this very predatorial mode, where they seem like their only ways to continue is to attack, or essentially kill themselves. Sort of that fight or flight circumstance that they just feel like they all of a sudden have rushing through their body. Uh, I sort of how we talked before about going postal, going ballistics with our other series. That's sort of along the same lines of going amok or running amok. That's sort of just these extremely violent episodes. But it's crazy that this specific phrase has earned its way into the DSM IVTR, essentially a mental disorders book that's highly respected.
Yeah.
Yeah, they use the DSM, depending on the version, to diagnose what different people
Yeah,
have.
and
Yeah,
it's
that's
changing
crazy.
all the time. Yeah, but this is one that's one saying that has seems to have scientific background and scientific findings with it, which is absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever heard it used. So, like, I've always thought of kids, like kids running amok. Like, oh, these kids are running amok. They're going crazy at the,
Yeah,
family reunion or whatever, bruh. But
Mhm.
I never knew that it was like violent. These kids are being violent towards one another or everyone around.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely insane. That's crazy that has such like a deep origin as well, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and was that the last one, Zach?
That was the last one.
All right. Well, thank you for that information. That's definitely going to make me have a different perspective when I'm using some of these phrases. So, I think especially the pulling one's leg and paying through the nose, a much more violent background than I would have guessed. So, yeah, thank you for that information.
Are you going to
And
continue to picture the South Park episode when somebody says beating a dead horse, or are you going to think of jockeys in races from now
yeah, I'm
on?
probably going to think of the jockey. Yeah, that's. I mean, I
The South
understand what
Park
they're
one's
saying.
just better to think of. It's a
Yeah.
little bit more friendlier.
South Park is like, if I feel like if the South Park one is doing it more so out of like stubbornness, like because the horse is dead, right? But you're still like trying to bait it. As to where the racing one is more out of like a desperation type of like, dude, we get what you're trying to do, but just stop beating a dead horse,
Right,
Yeah.
I get what
So
you're
kind
trying
of
to
two
say,
different
yeah.
meanings for the same saying there, I think. But yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that my favorite one out of the ones that we went for was fucking Goosebumps, bro. Just now I
So
can never
easy,
picture
yeah.
that like the pores on my face would have feathers coming out. I'm be like, no, I'm cool.
I'll never be able to read the books the same way again.
Never look at a goose the same way.